Artificial ruins, such as those of Hagley Castle, are mock buildings usually built during the 18th and 19th centuries. These kinds of buildings were made as ruins. Their existence was, and is, more similar to art than any conventional building. They were made to be decoration, sure, but also to elicit an emotional response from the observer. To induce a feeling of nostalgia for a history that never was. And the people wanted to feel nostalgia, not for their childhoods, not for memories, but for things that they never even experienced, and things that never even existed in the first place. And it is this fascination with nostalgia, with memories, even false ones, and want for belonging to a world that never was, that I find so interesting, that lays at the heart of the Class of 76 canon of the SCP universe. In this video, I will be going over the events tied to the Class of 76 chronologically, over the SCPs tied to the class, and over the lives of the few named characters we were given. The catalyst to all the events that take place here is SCP-2000. In short, 2000 is a Foundation installation located in the Yellowstone National Park. Its purpose is the rebuilding and repopulation of the world as we know it in the case of an end-of-the-world scenario. If the world ends, 2000 repopulates the world with new, quote-unquote fake people. They aid 2000 in its work, and aid in the rebuilding of the world in accordance with the selected time to which the world will be built. It is believed that it was used at least twice so far. And that's basically everything important that we know. Not even the Foundation knows the answers to the really important questions. Why did they have to build this thing? When did they do it? And how long have they been resetting the timeline for? In addition to that, the hidden text in the article urges the reader to stop what they were doing, calling it not normal, likely referring to resetting the world. Also important to mention is that the attached image contains the phrase "Remember us," the first of many mentions of such a nature. This all already gives us the core to the existential dread that lies at the heart of the Class of 76. The impossibility to ever know for sure if your life, your memories and all you ever were is a simple fake. For all you know, you could have been one of the fake people up until yesterday. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have the overwritten people. Maybe they were once fakes too. And yet, in some end-of-the-world scenario or another, they died, and the world reset itself to a time where they were erased. So it's not like their origins or lives matter in the first place. And I do think that it's worse than just dying, because due to the nature of 2000, it's not like you don't exist anymore. It's like you never even existed in the first place. Now, to ease everyone into this, first, I have to properly explain the timeline of events, as without proper introduction, things can easily get really confusing. Within the story, and the article itself, we know that SCP-2000 has been used at least twice, which means that we are working with a minimum of 3 timelines, but it might also be 4. Starting with the quote-unquote original one, which I will be calling the Trench timeline since most of what we know about it comes from the documents recovered from the Marianas Trench. This is the timeline we know the least about. Only that something catastrophic happened that warranted a reset by SCP-2000. Most of what we know from there is from the document recovered from the Marianas Trench. The document is a journal of a man who lived through reality falling apart. In his time, everything started with the disappearance of the cruiser called Disney Magic. From our real world, we know that the Disney Magic was put into service in 1998, so this is a different rebuild from the one that happened in 76. After the events, whose parts are mentioned in the recovered documents, that likely take place sometime after 1998, the planet is reset to 1947. The document recovered from the trench already sets up the motif of not wanting to be forgotten or overwritten. And with that, the trench timeline stops. The second timeline starts, once again, in 1947. What we do know about the second timeline we get from SCP-4833. The things that pertain to this timeline are the interview logs with anomalous subjects, and the footage whose transcript we received throughout the article, as well as 2 SCPs, both of which first appeared in the year of 1975 of the 76 timeline. These 2 being SCP-1423, the Polaroid. In short, 1423 is a Polaroid depicting several unidentified teenagers, believed to be taken in the summer of 1976. The subjects who view it are subjected to a memory-altering effect that makes them reminisce about the last summer vacation they took in high school. The phrase, "We've had a great year, haven't we?" is written on it. Over time, the dreams and memories produced by the anomaly will experience severe alteration, in essence, implanting the user with false memories. I think this photo was originally taken in the 76 timeline by the very kids that ended up as corpses in the lake of 2316. The lake. The lake is an anomalous phenomenon at a redacted lake somewhere in the US. The SCP manifests as a group of unidentified human corpses. Seeing these corpses makes the observer believe that the corpses are their dead friends and compels the observer to contact them, and attempting to contact the corpses compels an individual into the lake, where, if the subject enters, it is considered irreversibly lost. The corpses are actually those of the class of 76 of the, 76 timeline, who fell victim to some anomalous phenomena. They want to be remembered, just like the writer from the Trench timeline. They just don't want to be forgotten and overwritten, and as such call out to anyone and everyone who is willing to listen. The events tied to the Polaroid and the lake are tied to the summer of 76 of this timeline. The next thing we know about this timeline is also the last thing that ever happens in it, recorded on a Super 8 film camera by one of the few survivors of the timeline reset and possible founder of Syncopy Symphony. The footage starts with a shot of a town in the American Midwest, in this case, Boise, Idaho. The colors of the footage are completely wrong, and there is a large vortex with shapes emerging from it in the background. The cameraman is a white man in his mid to late teens with a 70s hairstyle carrying a violin. He records himself entering a cave with the term "safe house" on the far wall, and the footage cuts. The recording picks up sometime later, this time with the colors correct. He is talking to the camera, however his speech, face and hands are all distorted. In another shot, we see the hillside from the cave with the cameraman throwing up. And as the camera points towards the town, scaffolds are visible with thousands of orange jumpsuit wearing identical humans working on the rebuilding, all in line with the workings of SCP-2000. The footage cuts again, and now the town once more resembles Boise, this time as it was in 1940s. The camera turns and the cameraman is seen screaming. However, the previous distortion effects are now even worse. The camera cuts off. The last piece of footage we do get is of the cameraman now wearing a Venetian carnival mask. The distortion is worse, and now words are scribbled onto the cave walls, with the word Syncopy being circled. Now, Syncopy is another word for fainting. And with this, the timeline that ended in 1976 is once again reset to 1947. Now the last thing worthy of mentioning are the interviews with anomalous subjects from 4833, and from them we can gather. One anomalous subject, number 1, has a romance in 64, a road trip in 65, and is anomalously altered in 66. Since the subject's memories have been altered to the point of developing an inability to retain long-term memories, the subject keeps believing it's the year of 66. Another subject, number 88, has undergone alteration in 49, developing an obsession with the Marianas Trench, as well as a sheer fall from the edge of the world, once again something mentioned in the documents recovered from the trench. And the third mentioned subject, number 212, seems to have her memories replaced by those of a 17-year-old school kid from 1976. This 76 being the one from likely the 76 timeline. She possesses what is described as false memories of JFK and the Vietnam War, meaning those two events happened in a timeline that isn't her own, which is also consistent with false memories being implanted. However, this subject also has implanted memories of the footage whose transcript we get in the article. So, Subject 88 lived after the Trench timeline and 212 after the 76 timeline. This leaves us with the question of when did the interviews happen? Either in the current timeline, which means that in the current one is the one where JFK was never shot, or there was an in-between timeline where the recorded interviews are the only thing of note and the document is happening in the one after that. I don't have the answer, and the answer doesn't matter. I only wanted to mention this for the sake of clarity. Our story properly begins in 1947 with a group known as Syncopy Symphony. Syncopy is a group of 10 to 29 reality benders, often presenting as a musical supply shop or traveling orchestra that focuses on experimentation on teenagers for the purposes of establishing what they call a state of harmony. Whatever their main goal is, it is tied to the reality restructuring done by SCP-2000. Syncopy starts their work as early as 1947. They kidnap people around the world with a particular focus on the area around Yellowstone National Park. From that, it seems that they don't really have a clear picture of what they're doing and what they're looking for yet. They only have a vague direction by this point. This also means that by 1947, 2000 has been used at least once, and the exact date to which the world was reset is unknown, but we know it gave Syncopy enough time to organize to some extent. The members of Syncopy, according to the log given in 4833, appear to be the people who survived the reality restructuring that took place. In their timeline, it was 1976 when something happened that warranted a reality restructuring. How Syncopy developed their powers remains unknown, however it is most likely that those are the side effects of the anomalous restructuring and amnesticization. The next known event, chronologically, takes place in 1954, when Syncopy kidnapped and experimented on Vasily Stroganov. Vasily would later go on to become a Foundation agent as well as develop reality bending of his own, seemingly capable of making others remember things. We will return to the nature of those memories and to Vasily later. In 1964, Syncopy conducts mass experimentation in Boise, Idaho. However, they are forced to relocate as a result of pressure from the GOC and others. Again, Boise is the town being rebuilt in the transcript from 4833. 5 years later, in 1969, a musical supply shop is opened in a redacted town. This town is where the bulk of the events of 76 is going to happen. The shop, however, functions like a mundane shop for the next few years. After around 6 years, the next document, dated 10th of December 1975, is a journal written by a Kirk Lawnwood student and member of the marching band. He writes as if he was having a psychotic episode and wrote of his fears of rotting, aging, changing, and drowning. While his dreams are hazy, the only thing from them that he remembers clearly is the marching band. Only 2 days after that was written, the first event at Kirk Lawnwood takes place. The marching band performs a performance a bit out of the ordinary, but nothing too noteworthy. After which, the band remains in a catatonic state, having been anomalously altered in some way. Shortly after, the Foundation gets involved and the band is pronounced SCP-332. Days after the events tied to the marching band, the Foundation conducts interviews with students and professors. All of them describe the members of the band as students who were afraid of growing up and in some way obsessed with the band or music. The containment procedures for the band state that a standard security patrol is all that's necessary for the containment of the marching band between January and August. And it is exactly this lax attitude from the Foundation that ultimately allowed the subsequent events to happen. Despite what happened to the band in 75, the start of 76 starts as usual. And while Syncopy slowly weasels their way into Kirk Lawnwood High School, nothing seems out of the ordinary for just the standard Foundation patrols. Things only start snowballing in June, and they are again tied to the marching band. Most of what we gather from this time comes from the Remembrance series of tales, which revolves around a Kirk Lawnwood student named Lee. In the period between June 12th and July 18th, we can see Lee going from a normal high schooler to someone completely obsessed with the marching band. During this time, Syncopy starts funding school programs as a way to raise influence over the school. The school leadership and band leadership both change over time, again spurred by Syncopy. Band training gets more intense in preparation for the big anomalous event, and it goes so far to even give the students performance-enhancing drugs. Over those days, Lee's mental state declines to the point where he mostly speaks in musical terms, and seems to have fallen under Syncopy's influence completely, foregoing even eating for the sake of training for band. The next thing we know of is Lee being woken up, presumably by Foundation Mobile Task Force members. He gets taken into custody and is subsequently amnesticized. As soon as 1977, the number of kidnappings done by Syncopy decreases sharply, and it remains low. Next, we have an interview between Foundation agent John Hardcastle and Vasily, who is a former victim of Syncopy. Vasily was taken by Syncopy in '54, only 7 years after the reset, meaning that he is very likely one of the original quote-unquote people created by SCP-2000. A particular quote by Vasily that caught my eye is, "Everything you think anchors you is just a minute island washing through an endless sea. There is always another design, bigger than the last." Meaning that he understands the timeline resets, both past and future. He also states that Syncopy has found what they were looking for. After an escalation in difference of opinion, and Hardcastle threatening Vasily, it appears that Vasily uses some of his anomalous power to make Hardcastle remember things. Whether the memories are Hardcastle's or of his counterpart from the last timeline is unknown. However, upon remembering, Hardcastle dies, leaving us with one last quote by Vasily. "They want it too badly, don't you see? Don't you know what you did?" Further confirming that Vasily knows of the reset and of all the people lost and forcefully forgotten. The next event we know that happens for sure is Lee receiving SCP-1423. The date this happens is unknown, but Lee is an adult and I assume sometime after 1988. It is sent by Cindy, a girl with whom he went to high school. It takes effect and the memories of the trip start coming back. He remembers the band, he remembers the summer trip, he remembers Cindy, and that it was she who told him about Syncopy. And he starts remembering, but mentions that the whole year was a blur for him, and it was because he was amnesticized that summer. After some time, Lee is once again located by the Foundation. The Polaroid is confiscated, and Lee is amnesticized again. And that's ultimately where his story ends. The final event, tied to Syncopy Symphony, takes place on the 26th of January 2019, in an anomalous auditorium. A Foundation agent named O'Hara faces SCP-4833-A. -A is an anomalous violinist, his face covered by a white carnival mask, his movements that of an elderly male, and his speech distorted. He is surrounded by empty costumes of the other Syncopy members. They are dead. Due to the distortion on the side of the anomalous subject, we are only privy to the things said by Agent O'Hara. However, this transcript still includes some of the most important information we get. Going over the interview, Agent O'Hara says, "So it wasn't a plan at all. You faded. You declined. You didn't have to make them remember. Their lives weren't worth that. And you failed." The subject starts playing the violin, with the complexity increasing to inhuman levels as it goes on. O'Hara, obviously not knowing about SCP-2000, continues. "There is no bunker. There are no past words or forgotten peoples. You conned your followers into joining you, and they all left and died. Nobody was forgotten. There is only you. History is singular. The truth is singular. You are explicable. What happened to the class of 76 is explicable. It was the last summer. University next year. I had a Walkman, and it rained. I asked her after, and she said it wasn't a fight, but I remembered it differently. Which is the truth?" The anomalous subject falls to the ground, seemingly in pain, violin playing by itself. "What are we? Who are we? Don't you remember? Don't you remember?" Subjects with indistinguishable faces appear and surround Agent O'Hara. "I remember." The backup arrives and finds O'Hara conscious. She claims not to remember anyone or anything being present in the auditorium. Her memory is obviously altered, and the anomaly is forgotten. So, to clarify, Syncopy is a group of reality benders from before one of the timeline resets that were done by 2000. While they did not know what had happened to the world at first, they clearly realized that the clock was turned back and that the world had changed. They started conducting experiments, primarily on high schoolers, to try and have them remember the people from the previous timeline. Looking at the related SCPs, the Polaroid and the Lake, they work in a manner where they make the victim believe that they are a person from the previous timeline. However, to Syncopy, this is considered remembering. Syncopy then, in 1976, through their anomalous means, learned what truly happened, the deaths, the reset, and that the past is gone and overwritten, and that ultimately there simply is nothing to remember. And it's these concepts of remembrance and identity that lie at the core of the Class of 76 canon. Because in the timeline of 76, all those people have died. What led to their death is ultimately irrelevant. They wanted to live, and even in death, they wanted to be remembered. And it is not just the deaths. They were overwritten, and the world was made to forget. A world's worth of people, real people, all of a sudden, never even existed. Only Syncopy remained. Syncopy's ultimate goals do come from a place of compassion for those that were lost, but their effort is ultimately futile, and their means are just plain wrong. Their victims are children, Lee and the marching band, while technically the offspring of the fake replacement people, are still just people, no more or less real than any of the ones that came before. Do you remember? Don't you remember? We've had a great year, haven't we? Throughout the articles, there is many questions of this nature, all pointing towards an uncertainty, towards memories and the past. Syncopy being the one asking these questions, wanting people to second guess those things, to make them think and to make them remember. But there still is nothing to remember. The kids in the lake are neither wrong nor evil for wanting to be remembered. They are victims, and they are trying to call for help, but they can't be remembered. You do not recognize the bodies in the water. How could you recognize them? They are from a time that to you never even existed. They make you believe that you recognize them, that they are your family and friends. But they aren't, and they never will be, and that is just a sad state of their existence. From the transcript of the video footage in 4833, we get a few scenes that I think are worth talking about. Grains flicker across the screen before bursting into an image. It's a high school playing field. The year must be about 75, 76. The grain of the footage instantly invokes a feeling of times gone by, and the idea of a high school playing field, regardless of time or place, invokes memories of youth, nicely setting the mood for the article to come. A smiling group of people. Spectators all wave at the camera. Their movements are not constructed, or acted, or precise. They are messy and uncertain. Giggling and youthful people. Real people sitting right in front of you. Right? This one already touches on the subject of 2000, questioning the genuineness of the people. You remember school, don't you? Your experience was different. Different place, different time, but you remember it. While questioning the validity of the in-universe reader's memories, it also serves to make a connection based on commonality between the reader and the subjects in question. Skipping ahead to where the article is talking about Foundation agent John Hardcastle. No, he barely existed at all. Not many people left to remember him, and they'll be dead soon. This document immortalizes him, but only as a description of a recording, an abstraction of an abstraction. Hardcastle is immortalized in writing, but the person is so much more than any writing can ever truly cover. And once the people who knew him are dead, and their memory of who he was dies with them, he will be hardly more than a name on paper. The so nicely put abstraction of an abstraction. His mom's clothes are old-fashioned even for the time period. She looks like a faded 50s housewife, smiling a perfect smile at the camera. Her anachronism is flawed though, and little bits of the contemporary are sneaking in. The father smiles, short-sleeved shirt, old-fashioned watch, beer cans, sunglasses. A man who never thinks he's out of place and always is. You know these people. They're the same as any thousands of parents who live today, but their past placement still changes them, alters them. They're not the same. They're too natural to be from back then. This scene once again serves to connect the reader to the footage, as the concepts of a housewife mom and a dad drinking beer are so globally nostalgic. A man who never thinks he's out of place and always is the perfect line to describe the people created by 2000. The world ended, and everyone died, and yet the man, unwise to the horrors that may have befallen his very house, drinks his beer and watches the game. His peace secured only by the Foundation's veil of normalcy. A girl is smiling in a hallway. She laughs at some unheard joke her friend is telling her. A teacher walks past, a worried expression on her face. The sun is shining through a window. The picture quality washes the scene in grainy light. That hallway never existed anymore. Nobody remembers her. All you see is some light on a page, an image, a shadow of a shade that happens to resemble this creature from long ago. It's not a memory, but a flicker that indicates that something, anything, once moved there. One day, you will never have been either. While in the article, this is masked under the veneer of SCP-2000 doing timeline resets, this is arguably also just a simple truth. People, lives, memories, it will all fade one day. For some sooner, for others later. But it's ultimately still inevitable. And there's nothing really wrong with that. There is no real purpose to your name being spoken thousands of years after your death. At that point, is it even you they are talking about? Or is it just an idea of who you might have been, and does it even matter? And despite all of that, I still can't help but feel like this part sort of gives validity to memories. The girl from the text, she never existed. But not necessarily because she died, but specifically because there is no one around to remember her. To me, it very much feels like this article plays with the concept of the Hemingway quote, "Every man has two deaths. When he is buried in the ground, and the last time someone says his name." While the physical deaths did happen, they are almost neglected in the article, with the focus being mostly put on the second death, that of memory. Syncopy failed. Both Agent O'Hara and the violinist even said so. So it wasn't a plan at all. You faded. You declined. And of course I failed. How could I not fail? The Lee that died in 76 and the Lee that is alive today are two different people. Just putting the memories of the quote-unquote original into the new one, you do nothing other than devalue both. The new simply will never be the original, because he never was. And just knowing that he's a, fake or copy or double invalidates the real life and existence of the new one. And even ignoring that, Syncopy can never truly recover the memories they want, as the people holding them are simply no longer there. For everyone they want to remember so badly, and for everyone wanting to be remembered, Hemingway's second death has simply already happened. All they can get is glimpses, or, as the article states, flickers that indicate that something once was there. In failing their goal, to make people remember, Syncopy realized it couldn't be done. After fighting so hard to remember and to make the people remember and to be remembered, they simply realized the futility of their endeavors. And one after another they paid it, with the violinist being the last, joining the others from their time in the fate that they fought so hard to stop and to avoid, in being forgotten. And I like how the storyline and ultimate conclusion is used to portray such a mundane issue, that just letting go and being let go is a natural and normal part of life. And I also really love how, despite portraying memories as unreliable throughout the articles, they are ultimately still validated as the only true remaining reflection of who a person really was. We will never know how many of Hemingway's second deaths happen in day-to-day life around us, or even how many we might have witnessed. And it might just be easier not to know, to live in the happy ignorance rather than to carry the burden of remembering. But still, that burden is something that only we can carry. And that alone, I think, makes it worth carrying. Thank you. If you got this far, I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope I'll see you in the next one. See ya.